what does it take for the West to wake up to this reality? Because, I mean, you're aware of this reality. What would you say to them to communicate to them that this is real?
One of the biggest contributors to terrorism and violence actually hypocrites. Because when we are hypocrites, we're not calling things for what they are. We see the Islamists' threat. We see what they're capable of doing. And when I say CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, they know the ideological dimension that motivates terrorists and terrorist attacks.
Two of the greatest speakers of our generation are the great Douglas Murray and Mossab Hassan Youssef, the Green Prince. Let's hear what they have to say in this riveting interview. And of course, I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. So don't forget to leave your comments below and subscribe to this channel, and we'll talk to you on the other end of the video.
I remember speaking with you almost 10 years ago now, after a set of attacks in France, in Paris. There was the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the attack on a kosher supermarket, then the attacks when dozens of jihadists rampaged through Paris, massacred people at the Bataclan Theatre and the stadium and coffee shops. And I remember then asking you about, you know, what does it take for the West to wake up to this reality? Because, I mean, you're aware of this reality because you grew up in it and you saw it firsthand, and you were a very unusual person in thinking your way out of it, which, I mean, is incredibly unusual. I would say that most Israelis today understand the reality that there's a group or groups of people who say, we want to kill you, and if they get the opportunity, they do. But the rest of the West seems to me, even all these years after we spoke about it, still is in a sleep. What would you say to Emmanuel Macron, Rishi Sunak, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris? What would you say to them to communicate to them that this is real?
One of the biggest contributors to terrorism and violence actually hypocrites. Because when we are hypocrites, we're not calling things for what they are. We see the Islamists' threat. We see what they're capable of doing. And when I say CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, other intelligence services in the West, most democracies in the West, they know the ideological dimension that motivates terrorists and terrorist attacks. But we prefer not to talk about it because it's Islamophobic, or because it's controversial, or we may offend the Muslims. So now we're submitting to their intimidation when we don't talk about it, when we don't challenge it, that this is not acceptable. You know, it's not acceptable. Life depends on diversity. And the different is appreciated. Yes, we should have human discipline because we are not animals. But also we don't want someone acting as the sword of God, because then everybody would think that they have this authority, and the only outcome is bloodshed. We have the Muslims who live in the West, and I think there is no problem with that in principle. But don't enforce your religious identity, and when they do, we have to counter it. Like, for example, we cannot separate church and state and allow mosque and state to be united. We cannot just stay asleep while watching the Islamic hubs produce more extremists. And today, you know, we have so many Islamic fanatics who actually preach through social media, through YouTube, and they are based in London, they're based in Paris, and they don't only advocate for a peaceful Islam, actually they're just preaching very dangerous, radical ideologies, the Muslim Brotherhood ideologies that is anti-West, that is anti-civilization, that is representing the 7th century mentality as an alternative to the modern world. And they are protected by the freedom of speech. But there has to be a limit to where you can preach such sick ideology. And I think most of the leaders are afraid, whether they are ignorant of the topic or they have short-term interest and they don't want to compromise this interest. They don't want to offend Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia or like Qatar. They have their own calculations, but in the meantime, we cannot hide from the challenge because Islamists are in the West and they are waiting for an angry cause. And this is the dangerous thing about the Palestine. This is why one of the reasons that I came back and I came very strong against the pro-Palestine, because it's not about Palestine. There is no such a thing as Palestine. It's anti-West. And it's looking for an angry cause. Yeah. And the more anger they are able to generate, they're creating the climate for those individuals who have been waiting to act. So I don't want to say, what are we waiting for? Like another major terrorist attack? Then we are going to understand that we have an enemy within. I hope we don't get to that point. But let me tell you something. From my personal experience, when they start first shouting from the river to the sea, calling for Jewish genocide, it was no time before chaos. And it became suicide bombing attacks, became stabbings, it became mass shootings, it became, everywhere became a target. And Palestine is chaos. Islam is chaos. And of course, this is very hard to say, but I hope that we don't get to the point to see the things going completely out of control, to realize that we have individuals among us that we really need to leash, that they cannot take advantage of the freedom. There is a limit. You cannot advocate on behalf of terrorists and terrorist ideology by the name of freedom of speech. It's not acceptable.
You can't use freedom in a society to shut down freedom.
Absolutely, but because it's very hard to draw the line, and many people take advantage of this. Take, for example, after 9/11, Muslims went into the hiding for almost a decade or more than this. They just hiding their identity. And after October 7, it was just next day they start demonstrating against Israel and against the West.
In New York, in London, in Paris, everywhere.
Within a week, they showed so much aggression. And again, this is the bloodlust that I told you about, which is very strange. You look 9/11 and you look October 7, and what's after? Totally different outcomes. So why all this? And this hatred against the Jews that is attracting actually many Westerners who might have something in common, that they are all anti-Semites. And this is what's bringing the Islamists and the communists and could be the socialists even to work together. They have something in common, and that is their hatred towards Israel. But what many Westerners are not understanding, that this is not only anti-Israel, it's anti-success and it's anti-civilization. It's pro-chaos. This type of individuals and this type of movements, they thrive in chaos. They don't like order. In order, they die. And this is why they want to see more of the chaos.
Well, there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Douglas Murray, Mossab Hassan Youssef, the Green Prince. I mean, I can't think of two more powerful people in the world getting together and and describing the truth of the Middle East, describing what's going on in the Islamic world, describing what Mossab talks about. Don't forget, Mossab was the son of one of the founders of Hamas, an Islamic terrorist organization which takes over Gaza in 2005, 2006, runs it mercilessly, murdering people, spreading Sharia law. If you want to see what Sharia law society looks like, that was Gaza. They took money from American taxpayers, Canadian taxpayers, Australian taxpayers, European taxpayers. Hamas leadership, the Palestinian leadership, took all that money and built over 300 miles of underground terror tunnels, weapons factories. They planted their weapons factories under hospitals, under nursery schools, started firing at Israel for many years, missiles, which are weapons of mass destruction. And on October 7th, they unleashed one of the worst massacres in the history of the world, one of the worst massacres of Jews since the Holocaust. 1,200 people were murdered, children beheaded, burnt to death, people raped in front of their family members. They took 250 hostages and brought them into the dungeon tunnels of Gaza to torture them for 2 years, using them as hostages. And of course, they hid behind their human shields of innocent people. This is what Islamic fundamentalists do when they take over societies. And Douglas Murray made a tremendous point. You can't use freedom to take away freedom. That's exactly what's happening in the Western world. We're not talking about good Muslims. We're talking about people coming here who are sponsored by, ideologically, the Muslim Brotherhood, an organization in the 1920s which arose after the end of the Ottoman Empire. Its goal was to destroy the Western world. And I got to tell you something, Arab Muslim countries are much smarter than Western countries. The Muslim Brotherhood is banned in countries like Egypt and Jordan and other places in Saudi Arabia. They know of the dangers of what's happening in Islamic society, Islamofascist society. And that's exactly what's happening now in the West. So the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and other organizations set up shop in the West. They saw the opportunity, the money, the power, the freedom of the West. They set up shop in England. They set up shop in France. There are no-go zones in France today, dangerous places where Jews are being murdered, like in synagogues in Manchester. They set up in Australia. We saw the Bondi massacre about 2 months ago, where 15 people were murdered by 2 Islamists trained by ISIS in the Philippines, came back, father and son, the wanton slaughter of 15 innocent people. That's what's happening in Islamic society today. That is why they want to spread Sharia law. They know, according to Mossab Hassan Youssef, they want to spread chaos. And that's exactly what that is. When the pro-Hamas genocidal protesters on the left and the Islamists took over the campuses of Harvard and Princeton and Yale and all around the world in Columbia, they had one goal in mind, and they said it very clearly: from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The mayor of New York refuses to condemn the term globalize the Intifada because he wants to globalize the Intifada. He wants absolute chaos. Why would they want such a thing? Because they want to destroy Western civilization. And unlike in 9/11 about 25 years ago, where Islamists murdered over 3,000 people, as Mossab said, they went underground for a decade. But after October 7th, before Israel could even fight back, they were screaming from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and globalizing Intifada. They wanted murder, they wanted chaos. They worked very carefully, the left, who gave them the language of freedom, the language of human rights. They worked carefully with the left to take down our campuses in the United States and Canada, to take away freedom of speech. That wasn't a debate on the campuses. They were beating up Jewish students, intimidating people, breaking into campuses, causing absolute chaos. What you saw happening after October 7th on American campuses is what's happening in Islamic societies. They want absolute rule. They want absolute chaos. They want to destroy our societies. These are not people coming to debate and talk civilly about what's going on. It's about murder and destruction. And the more they do it, and we just saw that happen in Manchester in a synagogue, we saw that happen in Bondi, we saw people who are Hamas supporters calling for the murder of Jews in synagogues in New York City, in Brooklyn, and in Queens, and in New Jersey, and in California. They want absolute chaos. And what they do, unfortunately, is once they call for chaos and Western democracies don't stop them and fight back, unfortunately, massacres like we saw in Bondi happen quite frequently. They build up a type of rapture, an anti-Semitic rapture between the far left and the Islamists together until murder happens. That's why it's so important that people need to condemn these activities, speak out with truth, as does Mossab and as does Douglas Murray in this fantastic video. But of course, I want to hear what you have to say about this. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel, leave your comments below, and we'll see you in future great videos.